If you've been burned by financing or you have an EIDL and you have looked to seek financing, other financing for your business, if you've never embarked on the journey of applying for a business loan or business financing, this is the podcast for you. We talk with Carlos Weil from Capital Solutions Bancorp. This is our second podcast with him, and we talk about 5, but there's really 7 strategies to position yourself in the best light so that the lender, and most often lenders will use SBA, so they're involved too, to position yourself for financing and have it be as smooth as possible. You're going to want to hang out with us, even though it's a little bit on the longer side, but you're going to want to stay to the end because we talk about the types of businesses he works with. And we also get into a little bit of psychology 101 and the mindset of a business owner, entrepreneur, for taking care of this kind of thing for your business, especially when it comes to cash flow and understanding financial versus economic and all the good things. So hang out with us as we talk about 5, but yet 7 smart strategies when seeking business financing. Carlos, thank you so much for coming back and visiting with us and sharing all your knowledge with business financing and a less expensive way to get cash flow and infuse cash flow into your business. And first, I'd like to ask you, these 5 that you sent, what has happened in your 30 plus year career that has led you to this as a topic or these 5 strategies? Can you share with us?
Sure. Look, I talk to entrepreneurs for a living. This is what I do day in, day out for 30 years. And there are common patterns, things that entrepreneurs do, and many things that entrepreneurs don't do and should be doing. And I just made a list of them and started making this list a few years back. And it's almost like a checklist. And so often I go, why aren't you doing this? It's so simple and the benefits are just so obvious. Go there and do it. And that's why I made this list and I wanted to share it with your audience because it's almost like a foolproof, not only for the health of the business, but also facilitates being able to get more money, borrow money, and gives you visibility. I call it optics to what's going on with your business. It's just pretty basic stuff.
As you know, with our background, Trevor and I, pre-COVID, we were a business financing broker to help businesses facilitate getting an influx of cash into their business. It was unfortunate that kind of went away with COVID, and then we evolved in the EIDL space. But even then, we found a lot of business owners were coming to us when it was too late or the bulk of the damage had been done.
Exactly.
And to redo or undo it was a lot. So let's start with the first strategy that it almost seems, you use the word basic. It's almost like you don't want to insult anybody, but this does happen so often. And one of the first things that you sent to me was getting your books up to date. What do you see with business owners that they aren't up to date with their books and they don't have their act together?
Linda, it's just unbelievable. The people I speak with, and they don't have a clue what's going on with their business. So my point is, if you don't do anything else other than this first bullet point, you will be better. Forget about everything else. Do this. It's just like basic stuff. And just get your accounting up to date. It is a must have. Now, there are many reasons to do this. I'm just going to mention a couple of them, but many reasons. The first one is you're asking, let's say that you want to borrow money and you want to go to the bank or the SBA, whoever it might be, and you're asking somebody to bet on your business. That's actually what they're doing. And if you don't have your books together, you're asking them to take a leap of faith with you, and yet you submit your loan request and you don't have your numbers together. It's almost the same as saying, I don't have a clue what is going on in my company, but trust me and give me money anyway. If I would be the loan officer, I would just kick you out of my office. It takes a lot of nerve. So no, I don't want to insult anybody, but you have to have little bit of understanding for that loan officer. They say, no, sorry, we cannot do it because we don't trust you. That's basically what they would say. The second, and perhaps just as important, forget about borrowing money, but imagine, if you will, that you're about to go on a cross country drive with your family. Would it help to know your departure city and where you're planning to go, point A to point B? Would it help perhaps to have a map? That would be great. How about a fuel gauge that tells you how much fuel you have in your tank and can you make it to the next refueling spot? You would think normal people would think about all these things. And exactly the same happens in a company. You just look at, if you're just looking at the top line, your sales, oh, we did so much this month. It is the equivalent to going out on a cross country trip and just having a compass and nothing else. And yes, it gives you a general direction of where you're going, but you don't know what progress you're making. You just know a general direction. You don't know how much to go to your destination. You don't know what hurdles you might find alongside. So having your books in order is A1 priority. Nowadays, a bookkeeper is, I don't know, $20 an hour. So for a few $100 a month, you could easily get a monthly report of the most important things. And if you're making a profit or losing money, if you're generating cash or consuming cash, basic stuff, no excuse for not doing it.
Let me ask you this though. Are business owners, when you must confront them with this reality check, are they appalled or completely unaware or surprised? Or do they have any sense of like, you know what, I've been meaning to do that? Or is there any sense of humility that they missed the mark on this and now it's costing them something, a solution? Do you see this?
Yeah. Look, they're a little bit intimidated by the term accounting. Accounting has some words and concepts that, frankly, are foreign to somebody that never spent a minute on it. Nowadays, online, you can get a gazillion different courses that will teach you the basics. Accounting, in my view, doctors have a specific language. It's language of medicine and what happens to the body. The same happens with legal attorneys. They have their own language. Accounting is the language of business. And if you want to play in that sandbox, meaning have a business, run a business, make a profit, and create value, you need to know the basics of accounting. There is no way around it. But you don't have to be an accountant. You can just understand basic concepts, and that is sufficient. But you cannot ignore it.
Right. One of the things that I have found interesting is the dynamic with COVID and downsizing, and then people being forced to become a business owner. And let's be clear, an entrepreneur, I think, personally, I think is different than a business owner. You can be a business owner and not an entrepreneur, but the dynamic of the number of small businesses rising, to me, and to your point about they don't have to become an accountant or even understand some of the dense accounting principles. But what I think is interesting is business owners, if they just grasped onto having a little curiosity, when you have curiosity, then you're more likely to be open to
That's right.
understanding and discussing advanced skills and advanced practices, if you will, especially when it comes to cash flow. I'd like to move on to something that might not be something that people really think about, and business owners may not think about: business funding, business financing, cash flow. Why are they seeking this? Why do they need this money? And if you could go into the difference between the economic reasons and the financial reasons, because there's a difference and one
Absolutely.
could really impact the outcome of this, right?
100%. So the issue is this. Let's say that you're looking for money. The big, very, very key question is, why are you looking for money? What are you trying to do with that money? And obviously that goes back to the first initial point, and that is you need numbers, you need data to be able to answer that question. Let's suppose that we have the data. And the question now again is, are you looking for money because of economic reasons, or are you looking for money for financial reasons? This is not a philosophical question, far-fetched or whatever. It's a very important question. So let's explain. Economic reasons has to do with your economic model of your company. Is your company making money or is it losing money? The answer to that comes from the income statement, also called profit and loss statement, but it basically talks about your business model. Sales minus cost of goods sold gives you your gross margin, minus your overheads gives you your bottom line. Is that a positive number or a negative number? That is the issue with economic reasons. A totally different argument is financial reasons. And what is that? When we're talking financial or cash flow, we're talking about the timing of payments and receivables. Let's say that I'm manufacturing this pen. If my payables are faster, meaning I have to pay them sooner than my receivable when I sell this, there is a gap there, a time gap. Let's say it's a month. I am making a profit, but I still don't have the money to pay vendors and make payroll to produce this. It's interesting. More companies go belly up because of cash flow reasons, because they run out of cash, than because they could be making a profit, but they just are not turning the money fast enough. Now, once we know why we're looking for money, then we can look for the appropriate tool. Let's address the economic reasons. Let me make this very important statement. Borrowing money because your business is losing money is a terrible idea. It's a very bad idea. If you're losing money, your problem is the business model. Fix the
Mhm.
problem. Don't borrow to fill that loss because you're just digging yourself deeper into the hole. A big problem nowadays, as you and I discussed in the past, is debt service, the fees paid to MCAs. Now, that's a whole other podcast and conversation, but suffice to say that it is almost impossible to make your business model work if you have MCA debt. Don't do it. There are some strategies for that to get out of it and so on and so forth, but that, as I say, is another subject. It could be that you're losing money even without MCA. Losing money could mean that your overheads are not adjusted to this new level
Mhm.
of sales. Again, it's a bad idea to borrow money to cover up a loss. Now, conversely, borrowing money to buy an asset that is going to produce a profit is a fantastic idea. That is the way it should be. You should only borrow money for that asset to the extent that the profit is going to be higher than the cost of that money, obviously. And the last thing I want to say about borrowing money for economic reasons is when you borrow money, you're being an optimist. You're assuming that the conditions that you are projecting are going to happen. I urge your audience before they borrow money to think what happens if these conditions are not met and things go sideways.
I want to address this a little bit from
Sure,
the standpoint of sales. And this is not on the itinerary that we have planned, but
let's
this
go
is
for
a
it.
this is another pet peeve that I have, this forecasting you speak of. One of the things that we have seen related to EIDL is that these aren't people that we want to attract, and especially not consulting and counseling with them. But they often say, I didn't mean to take this loan, or I felt forced to take this loan. And they had a choice and they opted to take the money. And now they're having buyer's remorse or regret or whatever. But the thing is, when you take a loan, one of the first things you do is project the payments, when they start, how often they are, how much they are, and how that fits into the overall budget. I don't understand how that isn't part of the process in determining with borrowing money. Number one. Number two, I'd like to address what you see with clients with sales when they are choosing to borrow money for the right reasons. Do you have conversations about sales? Do they share with you their model, if you will, on how to repay this debt, to expect the asset and revenue generating activities to be positive to repay this debt. But what do you see anything with that in a
Look,
plan? Or
unfortunately not. Unfortunately not.
oh,
Unfortunately,
that's not what I'm
yeah,
hoping
there is
for.
there's a lot of flying by the seat of your pants. And I was talking earlier this week with a very nice lady. She has a oil and gas service company, and she said her sales dipped. Her sales went down at the beginning of the year, and she has an issue that it's very difficult to get staff where she lives. And she says, I didn't want to let them go because I don't know if I can replace them.
Mm,
And she said, I did take some MCAs. She is paying them off. She is paying them off. She did some good calculations. But the point is she made a judgment. And when I was talking to her, I got the feeling that she thought through it and she said, I need to make a decision here. I don't like the MCAs. I don't want to let my people go. So she set herself a time frame, and she said, I am going to pay for the MCAs for a certain amount of time, a certain number of months, and put a limit to it in an effort to see if the market came back and she could keep her staff. That is a measured, rational decision that I have no qualms with.
mhm,
She thought about it and she put limits to it. If you want to think about it this way, a loss in a company, you got a running company, and you know, like this lady did, that she was going to lose money for a certain amount of months. A loss at the end of the day is almost like an investment. I am going to subsidize this company with these losses for 6 months or whatever in an effort to continue to keep my staff and so on and so forth, because I believe that at the end of the puddle, if you will, situation will be better. I have no problem with that. I mean, a leader has to be able to take that kind of decisions, and that is fine. I have a problem with people that are losing money. They don't even know it that they're losing money, but an MCA comes and says, I'm going to give you $100,000. It's just going to be $4,000 that we're going to debit from your account. They never calculate how much it costed them money. They never calculate what other options there are, and they don't know why they're needing this money. That is what I have a problem with.
this is a good segue into the next point that we're going to be talking about that business owners miss the mark on, and that is tracking KPIs, key
That's right.
performance indicators. And I love this about without data, they're just stories.
That's right.
And I can't tell you the number of very dense emails that we get daily to this day, weekly and daily to this day, with a dissertation of how they got to where they are, that they are reaching out to us. Now, most of these people don't want to pay for the advice, but they're sharing their story, and I got to spend my time listening to this. But that's another podcast too, where my therapist will be involved. but, but let's talk about what
Yeah,
with since you're doing this full time,
that's right.
how
That's right.
I don't know how you do it. I don't know
Look,
how you
look, KPI are these gauges that we were talking about before. In other words, your balance sheet, et cetera, all that is fine. And I urge everybody listening to sit down one morning and say, okay, what are the drivers of my business? Let's say that you're a distributor, for example, and you buy and sell widgets, whatever it might be. The cost at which you buy your product is a pretty key determinant of whether you're going to have a good month or not. So think about what are the drivers of your business? What is when you have a good month or a bad month, what determines that? If, for example, you are a staffing company or I don't know, security company, payroll is probably quite important. So you need to know how many hours you're billing. And that is a huge component of the result of the month. If, on the other hand, you're I don't know, a manufacturing company, you might also want to track how much a product is being rejected for quality reasons. Whatever the drivers of the result of your company are, track it. If you have a teenage child, pay them $50 to create a graph and see how that is going. When it goes sideways and it's not doing what you expect it to do, figure it out why. These KPIs sometimes are not the cause of the problem, but it shows you a place where you have to dig deeper and find out what the real issue is. It's just a gauge. In other words, the fuel gauge is not what makes you reach the next town. It's just an indicator of whether you can or cannot. KPIs is very important, and I urge everybody to have these, I call it the dashboard, with 3 or 4 important performance indicator that are telling you how you're doing in your business.
Well, this goes back very cohesively complementary to the first one that we talked about, which was this is part of getting your act together with your books.
Uh,
It differs a little bit where you're not having to furnish or substantiate with documents, financials, and that kind of thing. But with the KPI, it certainly will smooth out the rough edges of producing what lenders need by even starting with something like this.
Even more so, if you show up to a lender's office and you say, here's my balance sheet, here's my income statement, here's my projected cash flow. And by the way, here are my KPIs, and I've been tracking it for the last year. And you show them nice graphs of how your business is performing and how you're looking into that shows that you're responsible. I love the word responsible because it's made out of response able, meaning you're able to respond because you see what is going on. And lenders are very impressed with that.
I love that. And it is definitely a good practice and how to build your muscles for lending opportunities and to
100%.
be right and to be qualified for lenders to not laugh you out of their office
That's
because
right.
you don't have your act together. I'd like to move on to something that might be a little bit more complex for some. For me, I know because I don't really live in this world that we're about to broach. I know you and Trevor geeked out about this particular topic for a very long time. And I'd like for you to explain what this means because it does come up with EIDL. And when people are either selling a business or buying a business or any kind of change with even paying off an EIDL loan. And so, not to keep anybody in suspense any longer, drum roll, please. The spring cleaning of UCC filings and what this means for business owners and why is this relevant to them and why should they even pay attention to it?
It's something you don't think about every day, and that's why I call it spring cleaning. But let's start with the basic. What is a UCC filing? When somebody lends money to your company, they will typically, they don't have to, but they will typically file a UCC. And that is a UCC, imagine like it's a big book. Obviously now it's online, but it used to be a big book. Yes.
I'm going to just qualify for people that don't know that it's the
Uniform
Uniform
Commercial Code.
Commercial Code. Uniform.
Correct.
I'm going to put a banner up. Okay, sorry, continue.
It stands for Uniform Commercial Code, but it's every state has a version of it. They're very similar throughout the country, but just know that they're slightly different from state to state. But the important thing is the following. Let's say, Linda, that you have this distribution company and you want to borrow money. The lender will typically, again, doesn't have to, but will typically file a UCC on the assets of your company. And what does that do? It basically tells the world, because this is public information, it tells the world that this particular lender gave you money using certain assets as collateral. Okay. Now, what happens very often is that lenders file UCC, and then when Linda pays off the loan, they leave it there. They leave the UCC there and they don't terminate it as they should. Now, it is in your interest to review that and make sure that the UCC filings that are there should be there. In other words, that they're legitimate and that there is an outstanding debt. Why? Let's say that you could now go to the bank and you want to borrow $100,000 from the bank. The bank, the first thing they do is they do a UCC search, again, public information. So they get the search. And here are 20 filings from the last 5 years of people that gave you money and you paid them off. There might be some legitimate ones, but there might be some that people that you inquired with, they never gave you money, but they filed anyway. So there might be, if you excuse my French, a lot of crap there that shouldn't be there. And if you don't do this due diligence, I would say once a year, of going through the filings of your own company to make sure that the UCC filings that are there should be there. And that's all. That's very, very easy. It doesn't cost more than 25 bucks to do the search. And it's important to keep that clean. Let me tell you why, and I'm going to share with you a horror story.
Oh, I love horror stories.
This is a real horror story. We had a client not too long ago, actually, it was a prospect that borrowed from, unfortunately, an MCA. They borrow from an MCA files UCC, okay? And suddenly he finds out that the lender, the MCA, disappeared, went belly up, closed doors, nowhere to be found. Who knows what happened? But they disappeared, okay? Our guy, our prospect, had paid his debt. So he needed that UCC to be terminated because it was no longer necessary there because you paid off the debt. You cannot terminate somebody else's UCC. So he had to go and get a court order and spend thousands of dollars to be able to get this UCC terminated by court order. So my point is this: make sure that the UCCs that you have on the record of your company are the ones that should be there. If you borrow money from a bank, from an equipment lender, whoever it might be, and it's legit, then no problem. But if it is a loan that you never got, or a loan that you paid off, then you need to get in touch with that lender and say, you got to terminate this. And by the way, just let me add one more point. By law, if the lender is not owed any money, they have to terminate it. They cannot say, well, let me think about it or whatever. They can get penalized if they don't terminate that. You cannot file a UCC. It will leave that UCC there if you're not owed any money.
Wow. This is what I mean about the pet peeve that I have with business owners being a little more proactive in managing their business so that
it's very easy stuff. Again, it doesn't cost anything. If you don't have the time to do it, pay a paralegal $100. They'll do it for you. It's easy stuff, but you cannot show up at a bank asking for money with 10 pages of UCCs, half of which shouldn't be there.
Okay, we're going to move on to the fifth. I think it's the fifth. I feel like it's the fifth, but it's a super secret stealthy strategy, which I don't know if you know that I love alliterations. We are going to reveal because I couldn't wait to hear what this is. But if you're watching, please do not leave yet because we have 2 bonus tips, ways, things to do with seeking financings. But let's get the super secret stealthy strategy out of the way.
This is an awesome idea. We discussed UCC a second ago, and the first position, also called the senior position, is very coveted. Why? Because the vast majority of lenders will not give you money unless they're senior. They will simply not do it. So the first position, UCC, is very, very, very important. My suggestion, and again, I'm not an attorney, but I have suggested this to some of our clients and they did it successfully, is the following. Go online and register a DBA. It could be the name of your pet. It could be something that sounds financial, like First Choice Finance. You pick the name. It doesn't matter. Most counties don't charge anything to do it. I'm not going to tell you here how to register a DBA. Just do it. It takes a few hours. Then use that DBA as secured creditor and file UCC on your own company. It is 100% perfectly legal. There's nothing wrong with it. As you go through this spring cleaning that we were discussing in the previous paragraph, eventually your filing will be senior. It might take a year or two, but after cleaning up the old ones, paying off debt, etc., your filing under your pet's name will be senior. And you are able now to keep that position. And my suggestion is that now you can go to any normal bank or asset based lender or factoring company or whatever it might be. And when they say, so sorry, Linda, we cannot give you money because we cannot be senior, you say, oh, yes, you can. The senior position is mine, and I'd be happy to assign it to you.
Oh, I was wondering when that was how that was going to come into play.
Mhm.
So that's a bit of a negotiation tactic too, right? And leverage.
It's basically you're reserving as a figure of speech that senior position, and you can give it to a lender that is willing to give you money and needs that first position. So they will leapfrog, if you will, over any MCA or any other lender that might be there, and they can take that first position when you assign it to them. Now,
That
the one caveat
okay.
is that UCC filings expire, if you will, every
Mhm.
5 years, 5 years counting from the date of filing. So if you file in 5 days, like magic, that will disappear. It is important that you put a tickler in your computer that to renew it at 4.5 years, you can go and renew it, but don't let it expire because it will go away and your effort will be for naught. So every 5 years you renew it, you can keep that senior position. And when you want to borrow money from a bank or whoever it might be, you assign it to them and off you go.
I've never heard of that. I
Oh,
absolutely love that's not only being proactive, but that's being so strategic.
that's right.
Holy cow, I didn't even know that was possible. I thought the senior position had to be like a lender, a bank, or the SBA, or
So
a financial institution.
you can create a note where Linda owes lends money to your company $5. It's a debt. It doesn't matter. You get the first position. It's
Wow.
perfectly legal.
That is so cool. I love sexy strategic things. So
You
this
can call
was
it sexy if you want, but the point is, it opens up the opportunity for you to get better financing
yeah.
because if you don't have that senior position, your options for borrowing money are much, much more limited.
Let me ask you this question that I don't even know if it's relevant, but I'm curious. First of all, this is assuming you've never borrowed money and you don't currently have outstanding debt with an institution. This is something like you
Well,
would want to do before you even start.
ideally, the first thing you do after you incorporate it is you file it yourself. So you reserve that
Got it.
position while you got it. But let's pretend that you're 15 years into the business and you got MCAs and you got different filings there. I would urge you to do it anyway because eventually through this, you're going to pay off that debt and you're going to do the spring cleaning that we discussed. It's going to eventually you will be senior.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
So the other cool thing is that you have 2 bonuses
that's
that
right.
yeah, so 2 bonuses of what 2 easy strategies every CEO should
Yeah.
consider.
Let me tell you, as I said at the beginning, we speak with entrepreneurs for a living, and it's almost like, what are your headaches? Sometimes I ask them, and they fall into two big categories. And I think that if these two big categories can be resolved, being an entrepreneur, being a leader of your company can be fun again. The first one, big issue, is what I called and is known as single point of failure issue. What does that mean? Whenever you have concentrated risk, that is a single point of failure. What does that mean? If you're selling mostly more than 50% to one customer. That is a single point of failure. If that customer goes away, it's a big problem. If you're buying from mostly a single vendor, that is a problem. If you're relying on a single salesperson, that is a potential problem. You might be the single point of failure. If you disappear, what happens to the company? So, single point of failure equals, if you want to create an equation, equals a headache in the waiting. In other words, diversify your customer base, diversify your vendors, diversify your sales channel. Whenever you're relying too much on a single thing, you can bet that is going to be a headache at some point. That is one big suggestion.
I'd like to chime in on this because I think this
Please.
goes to a business owner, an entrepreneur. I think they already understand this concept because when you're an entrepreneur, you have multi businesses, multi-faceted outsourcing resources. But with business owners that own a job, this is where I think it's a headache in the making, that they're not even thinking ahead. There's no forecasting. Forget financials, just what you say, these points of failure, and not diversifying, not thinking ahead, that because everything is temporary, and that includes things that are happening that are really good. It doesn't mean it's going to last forever.
Let me give you the perfect example. When a client comes to me and is all excited and says, Carlos, we got a humongous, I had it the other day, $2.5 million purchase order from Costco, or fill in the gap, Walmart or Amazon. And this more than doubles their business. It's a recipe for headaches, because what's going to happen inevitably is that overheads are going to go up because now we're swimming in money. And now at some point, Costco is going to disappear and we're afraid of reducing overhead. It's a problem. I like slow, conservative, one foot after the other growth. The idea of relying on one big purchase order from Walmart is a problem. We had this other issue with Amazon. Amazon is great company, except for the fact that they pay into some vendors, they pay in 120 days. How are you going to finance that?
That's right. To your point, and why I put this banner up, is the good problem to have. But with good problems come other issues that need to be addressed, that could be costly. It's not just the revenue. You can look at $2.5 million and it's great, but if it takes you $2 million to make that a possible revenue stream, the profit center. And also, how long is this 2.5 years, 2.5 million? How long is this contract? And do you even know if it's going to be renewed? And that's a really good point.
That is, single point of failure is one big source of headache, which immediately leads me to what we were just discussing, which is cash flow. That is the other source of unhappiness and frustration in so many entrepreneurs. Cash flow, essentially is related to timing of when payables are due compared to when receivables are due. And so many people understand it in their gut, but don't do much about controlling that. Receivables immobilize cash. It's there, and you cannot make payroll with receivables. You need cash. You cannot pay vendors with receivables. Vendors will not take it. They want the cash. So how is these receivables and payables interact is a key consideration. As I said before, more companies go belly up because of lack of cash than because they're losing money. They might be making money, but they run out of the cash. Now, interestingly, cash flow issues are based on two variables. They could come because of two reasons. One of them is growth. You're just growing too fast, as we were discussing a second ago with this Costco order, where suddenly you get this big purchase order and the vendor goes, yes, but I want the money now. And you go, no, I'm going to collect in 60 days from Costco. They go, sorry, not enough credit. So that is a big problem. You got to pay before those receivables come in. That is reason number one. And the other one is just simply a business cycle kind of thing. In other words, you don't get any terms from payroll. Payroll you got to make every week or every other week, otherwise the good people start leaving, and you don't collect for 30, 60 days. So how are you going to fill that gap? That is a key question. I cannot underscore it more, but these two bonus points, and I wanted to stress the single point of failure and cash flow. Those are, I would say, the main reasons why business owners, entrepreneurs start not liking what they do. So
Interesting.
I would say focus on those things, focus on diversifying your single point of failure so that you're eliminating anticipating problems, and work on your cash flow. If those two things can be anticipated and worked on proactively, the vast majority of your headaches are going to just not even show up.
I know we started out talking about 5, but we've actually touched on 7,
That's
and
right.
I think the last one about cash flow is something a business owner can do very easily with just strategically taking a pause at regular intervals to kind of say, all right, what am I doing? And what's not working? And what are some of the solutions? And what's it going to cost me? And who can help me? And when can I do this? And how does it get done? That's just off of the top of my head, the stream of consciousness that we actually talked about a little bit in the green room. And I just wish more business owners would be a little more mindful of understanding ramifications when things could go wrong. So being proactive up front means that they can find somebody like you that isn't just saying, yes, I will lend you money. You're saying, let's figure out a way we can do this together so
That's
that
right.
you're successful. Because when you're successful, I'm successful.
Right.
Meaning, you as a lender, you as someone who's assisting them with facilitating the financing. I can't thank you enough for both podcasts are so
I,
informative. I think they're so grounding because a lot of people can be a little bit on the emotional side, and especially to the point about the second point. I think it was the second point, which was nope, it was the third point about KPIs versus stories.
that's right.
And I just can't thank you enough for sharing your insights. There, it's intel, but with depth and insights. Oh, let's talk about where people can find you besides the fact I have a banner.
The best way is just drop me an email or send me a text, 239-822-9906. I'll be happy to return your call and help in whatever way I can.
And we should note, though, that, and this was discussed in our first podcast, but just to reiterate it here at the end, that you work with only B2Bs,
That's right.
business to
That's
business,
right.
not
Yeah,
B2C.
we cannot do B2C. B2B is our bread and butter. We've been doing it for 30 years and just love it. Love it.
I
The
know.
one I want very short, what I want to say to your last point is take the time to think. Think time is very, very important. But think about it this way. Yes, you got to do operational stuff, whatever it might be, and produce invoices, whatever it might be. Take the time, turn off your phone, 30 minutes. You don't need more than 30 minutes. Focus and think about your issues. Otherwise, you're just a clerical person. You're the leader of your company because you got to have the ability to think forward and take the tough decisions and take risks. But emotions have no vote in business. They should not be involved in business. So take the time to think about your issues.
I love that I've had enough therapy to introduce a little bit of a psychological component to this. And I think where people miss the mark is they're so used to doing that viscerally their bodies are always in motion. They're always in action. And it's a conscientious effort to stop and do nothing but think.
That's
And
right.
that can be very difficult if you're used to doing, putting out fires, reacting, overreacting, etc. But that's just like Psych 101 segment of the show. So thank you again, Carlos. Any
My
parting
pleasure.
words that you'd like to share?
No, just listen to this again. We dumped a lot of information. I don't want to overdo it, but there's some good pearls of wisdom there. And feel free to text me or call me if you're a B2B business and we can be of help. I'm here for you.
Love it. Thank you, Carlos. We'll see you next time.
Take good care.